was delighted to be asked to do this introduction, and I thought maybe I would do it in Italian. But then I remembered I don't speak Italian. So I thought I'd do it in my own native tongue. We do have, however, as you well know, very important links to Italy. Not only is it the home of the Universal Church, it's the home of the International Congregation of the Holy Spirit. Their headquarters is in Rome. And of course we have our own campus in Rome where many of our undergraduates study a semester, and it really is a profound experience. So it is a delight to be able to host an Italian scholar and one of Father's prominence. Father Renzo Pegoraro is a professor of bioethics at the University of Padua in the School of Obstetricians of the Faculty of Medicine. In addition to being a priest, he is also a doctor of medicine and is a student of both philosophy and theology. So if you have a problem with your body or your mind, he's your man. He has served as president of the Research Ethics Committee of the Medical Centre of Padua, and a member of the National Healthcare Council, and served as an ethicist at numerous institutions. He has published work on biomedical ethics in particular, religion and bioethics, human experimentation, organ transplantation, and elderly care in multiple journals and books. He presently has an exceptionally important position. He's Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy for Life at the Vatican itself. So we're delighted to have with us today Father Renzo Pegoraro. I told you I couldn't speak.
Thank you. So it is a pleasure for me to be here, and thanks to the president of the UK University, and express also gratitude to Professor Nave, who invited me to this Kelly lecture, and greetings to all of us, all of you that who are here. And I try to offer my reflection, my lecture, concerning these topics, the sign of the times, from the Council Vatican II to the birth and development of bioethics. We celebrate now the 50 years of the opening of the Vatican II, and that was the time of the, more or less, the beginning of the ground, the dialogue, and the perspective of bioethics. So I try to present some reflection, some perspective concerning that beginning, a relationship between the Council and bioethics, and the development during the years, and some perspective for the future. In fact, I present these 5 points. The meaning of the sign of the times, this expression that we find in the Council, and what is the meaning today, the birth of bioethics, interdisciplinary and interconfessional dialogue, some remarks on later developments, and some perspective for today and for the future. So, the sign of the times. In the Gospel of Matthew, he said to them in reply, "In the evening you say, tomorrow will be fair, for the sky is red, and in the morning today will be stormy, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to judge the appearance of the sky, but you cannot judge the sign of the times." What is the meaning of this expression? The expression, the sign of the times, appear in various documents of the Second Vatican Council, for example, Unitatis Redintegratio and Presbyterorum Ordinis. It is, however, in the opening speech of the Council by Pope John XXIII and in the whole of the Pastoral Constitution Gaudium et Spes that it appears most often and where its meaning can be best understood. In fact, the expression refers to a series of contents, but above all, it indicates an approach to reality, to the world, to the positive and negative phenomena which characterize human society at today. Gaudium Spes number 4 says, to carry out such a task, the Church has always had the duty of scrutinizing the signs of the times and of interpreting them in the light of the Gospel. Thus, in language intelligible in each generation, she can respond to the perennial questions which men ask about this present life and the life to come, and about the relationship of the one to the other. In the 60s, the years of the Council, but also in our own time, there are profound changes which challenge believers and non-believers alike to seek together a solution. In Gaudium Spes number 5, advances in biology, psychology, and the social science not only bring men hope of improved self-knowledge. In conjunction with technical methods, they are helping men exert a direct influence on the life of social groups. Thus, the human race has passed from a rather static concept of reality to a more dynamic, evolutionary one. In consequence, there arise a new series of problems, a series as numerous as can be, calling for efforts of analysis and synthesis. Vatican II reflects a relationship with the world according to the scheme See, Judge, Act. That is to say, to know and to understand the world, its change and its developments, but also to see the risk and the attacks on life. Therefore, there is a need to apply a discernment which is accurate, which then acts as a guide in the decisions to be taken. The semi-constitution, Gaudium Spes number 11, says, the people of God believes that it is led by the Lord's Spirit who fills the earth. Motivated by this faith, it labors to decipher authentic signs of God's presence and purpose in the happenings, needs, and desires in which this people has a part along with other men of our age. For faith throws a new light on everything, manifests God's design for man's total vocation, and thus directs the mind to solutions which are fully human. Reference to the signs of the times return also in the recent document of the International Theological Commission of last year, which says, the signs of the times may be described as those events or phenomena in human history which in a sense, because of their impact or extent, define the phase of a period and bring to expression particular needs and aspirations of humanity at that time. The Council's use of this expression, signs of the times, show that it fully recognizes the historicity, not only of the world, but also of the Church, which is in the world. One might think, for instance, of the discovery of historicity and of movements such as the Enlightenment and the French Revolution, movements for emancipation and for the promotion of women's rights, movements for peace and justice, and the ecological movement. The ambivalence of human history has led the Church at times in the past to be overly cautious about such movements, to see only the threats they may contain to Christian doctrine and faith, and to neglect their significance. However, such attitudes have gradually changed thanks to the sensus fidei of the people of God, the clear sight of prophetic individual believers, and the patient dialogue of theologians with their surrounding culture. A better discernment in the light of the gospel has been made with a greater readiness to see how the Spirit of God may be speaking through such events. So attention to the sign of the times is animated by a spirit of confidence and optimism, but also by a regard which is critical, especially toward the ambivalence of progress in science and medicine. We think in the 60s of the civil and military developments of nuclear energy, and in the field of medicine of the problem of experimentation on human beings and of the impact on them of technological manipulation. This call to the sign is inserted also into the cultural, religious and political movement of the conciliar and post-conciliar period, which forms the ground from which comes the genesis of bioethics in the United States and to its expansion throughout the world. I would say that bioethics too can be located among the signs of the times, calling for new attention to new problems, developing an ethical reflection which is more adapted to the new challenge, a new commitment to an ethics of life. So, probably many of you know this book, The Birth of Bioethics, by Albert Johnson. So concerning the birth of bioethics, the recognition of progress in the field of human activity, including medicine, with the results and the risk that this represents, and the need for dialogue at all levels, are two categories of thought and of action which emerge from Vatican II and which are combining the birth of bioethics. In fact, there are some conciliar concepts and pointers which stimulate Catholic moral theology to confront the new problems emerging in the medical context in a new way, currently and perhaps in part promoting a greater awareness and suitable responses to such problems. I try to recall some conciliar concepts and pointers emerged by the Vatican II and that entered also in the beginning of bioethics. One concept is dialogue, the concept of dialogue, of a bridge. This concept expresses the spirit of Vatican II and will be basic concept in the rise of bioethics, especially the work of Russell Potter. In fact, the Council wanted to show solidarity with and respect for the entire human family in facing questions emerging at that time, establishing a dialogue with the latter about the various problems noted above, bringing to bear the light of the gospel. I will return later to the concept of dialogue and to the forms of that dialogue, which have made a particular contribution to bioethics. My point here is to show the relationship between the beginning of bioethics and this concept and concerns of the Second Vatican Council. Second, legitimate autonomy of scientific research, recognized and respected as to its own methodology, in a possible relationship with faith, will not be one of contrast or of opposition. Confidence in people of science was affirmed, for example, in the message of the Council to men of thought and of science. We are friends of your vocation as researchers, the allies of your efforts, with a profound agreement between true science and true faith. And fourth, an awareness of the threats which exist in terms of everything which goes against human life or which offends against the dignity of the person. Gaudium Spes number 27 generates a long list. Furthermore, whatever is opposite to life itself, such as any type of murder, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, or willful self-destruction, whatever violates the integrity of the human person, whatever insults human dignity, and so and so. So the dignity of human intelligence in searching for truth and wisdom, and our era needs such a wisdom more than bygone age if the discoveries made by man are to be further humanized. This is Gaudium Spes number 15. So the Catholic Church considers that it is able to offer a specific contribution of its own to the good of the human person and of society as a whole, operating in the light of the gospel and of human experience. To a consideration of this in the light of the gospel and of human experience, the Council would now direct the attention of all. And so there is also an interesting expression, because on the other hand, it is recognized that faced with the question which have been raised about progress in science and in medicine, an easy and immediate answer is not always available, and there is not always a unanimous position in their regard, even among believers. In Gaudium Spes number 43, let the layman not imagine that his pastor are always such expert that to every problem which arises, however complicated, they can readily give him a concrete solution, or even that such is their mission. Rather, enlightened by Christian wisdom and giving close attention to the teaching authority of the Church, let the layman take on his own distinctive role. Yet it happens rather frequently, and legitimately so, that with equal sincerity, some of the faithful will disagree with others on a given matter. And this is a question of which kind of pluralism also in the Church, particularly concerning complicated, urgent cases, situational problems. A second aspect in the birth of bioethics was the debate on contraception and the encyclical Humane Vitae of 1968. Having difficult and tortuous debates within the Catholic Church, such as the one on contraception, have produced fruits of interest to the process of the genesis of bioethics. Warren Reich claims that the term bioethics had a bilocated birth in the years 1970-71, referring one to Van Rensselaer Potter, a research oncologist of the University of Wisconsin, who after an article in 1970 published a book in 1971, Bioethic Bridge to the Future. And this book sounded the alarm about the risks involving developments in science and technology, invoking a bioethics to ensure the survival of humanity and of the planet. Then came André Ellegers, a Dutch gynecologist who had participated in the work of the Special Interdisciplinary Commission in the Vatican on the problem of contraception. Ellegers' judgment on the experience of the Commission was very positive, even though his assessment of the results was different from those which emerged in the Humane Vitae. And he held that it was necessary to continue with the research and with the dialogue between medicine, philosophy, sociology, theology, and ethics to confront the challenge arising from biomedical progress. Ellegers helped to establish the John and Rose Kennedy Institute for the Study of Human Reproduction and Bioethics at Georgetown University in July 1971. As Albert Johnson records in his work, The Birth of Bioethics, as bioethics was coming into being, Roman Catholic moral theology was in turmoil. It was undergoing an inner debate about its methods. The turmoil within the tradition may have stimulated its contribution to the emerging bioethics. Theologians were now rethinking familiar moral questions that were under pressure from the advances in medicine and science. I quote this from Johnson. So the debates on the concept of natural law and its interpretation, on which the magisterium of the Church claims to have specific competence, the biblical and the personalistic perspective supported by Vatican II, the dialogue with biological and social science, are all elements which, whatever tensions and suffering they may provoke within the Church, foster a reflection which is both more careful and more precise about questions which arise from scientific discoveries and social change, the new conquest of medicine, but also movement for human rights and patient rights, women's liberation, issues of justice and the renewal of civil society. And third, the ethical question emerging from medicine. Physicians in clinical practice and researchers in medical science generated a continuous string of ethical questions during the 60s. What was required was organized study of the emerging ethical questions. Daniel Callan, the former editor of Commonwealth, the Catholic Journal of Politics and Religion, established the Hastings Center in 1969 for that purpose. This was seen as an important first step establishing the bioethics. But there's also a particular issue that could be interesting to analyze and to discuss. According to Johnson, cited above, but also according to other American authors, bioethics is a typically American reality, which arose in the United States due to a particular combination of social and cultural factors. For other European authors, such as, for example, the Spanish Diego Gracia, bioethics is a phenomenon of secularized Western society as a whole. It poses a question about the challenge of medical progress and about cultural change by means of a new ethical approach. Diego Gracia says, "My hypothesis is that the success of bioethics is not directly related with the peculiarities of the American ethos, but with some more general characteristics, such as the secularization of Western culture and the emancipation of the decision-making process in the question related with the human body, and therefore with life and death. These decisions were generally, until the second half of the 20th century, in the hands more of priests, theologians, and churches, and hence they were not open to public discussions. The debates about the contraception and abortion opened the door to the public scrutiny in this set of questions. Instead of statements of authority, people began to ask for philosophers, professors, and researchers in ethics were progressively engaged in this kind of discussions and started to be interested in the field of normative ethics. Also in this point, it may be recalled that the post-conciliar development of Catholic moral theology, in the reflection of certain authors, led to a kind of desacralization of ethics in the perspective of an autonomous morality. This was so especially at the normative level, even if in the light of the faith and of the Christian revelation. There were attempts to foster dialogue with the positions of believers of other religions and with not-believers, in search for values and for objective norms rationally grounded in human nature, on the basis of which they might put forward points of convergence. In respect to themes such as these, especially in regard to the relationship between ethics and the Christian faith, and to what is ethically specific to Christian faith, and the foundation of moral norms, difficult points remain still open for further reflection as to how human nature and the natural moral law are to be interpreted and as to what their normative implication may be. The third point is I focus a little bit about the concept of dialogue and two levels of dialogue: interdisciplinary dialogue and interconfessional dialogue. The experience of the Kennedy Institute, in particular, brings our two new and important ways of approaching the ethical problems which have arisen from biomedicine. One is an interdisciplinary approach, seeking comparison and collaboration between the different disciplines while respecting the autonomy and methodology of each of them. The references already made to Gaudium et Spes, number 36, reinforce such an approach in order to further, by means of this dialogue, an understanding of the ethical problems that is more complete and adequate, and also the identification of a concrete solution for action in accordance with truth and wisdom. James Keenan, taking up the French author Bourdain, remind us that the Church conveyed a deep sympathy for the human condition, especially in all its anxieties, and stood in confident solidarity with the world. The entire experience of ambivalence that so affected the world in its tumultuous change of the 60s was positively entitled and engaged. The Church encouraged an interdisciplinary approach in understanding and promoting a globalized vision of modernity. And interconfessional dialogue was encouraged by the Council, both at the level of a dialogue between Christian churches through the decree Unitatis Redintegratio on ecumenism, and at the level of a relationship with the different non-Christian religions through the declaration Nostra Aetate. In this connection, what Johnson relates in his text, in his book cited above, is interesting. The era of dialogue between Catholic and Protestant ethicists, but also some Jewish were involved, prepared the way for dialogue during the era of bioethics. The Catholic and the Protestant traditions entered the era of bioethics with a rich heritage of theoretical reflection and practical admonition about the moral life. The tradition differed, yet both traditions brought to bioethics a wisdom about the moral life and a dexterity in discourse about moral behavior. So I try to, quickly, some remarks on later developments of bioethics, so I present some conditions, some relationships, some concepts and some concrete experience at the beginning of bioethics, and which kind of developments in the next days, in the next times. So bioethics has developed and expanded widely at the international level. Catholic moral theology, involved in a significant way from the beginnings of bioethics, has continued to play an important role in the years which followed, even though the presence of philosophers and of jurists has increased. Analyses have already been undertaken and extensive writings have appeared on the evolution and change, at times problematic, in bioethics, which is increasingly secularized and at times reduced to matters of scientific data and to the juridical solution to the questions at issue. Certain alarming bioethical problems have assumed special relevance and diffusion, such as the legalization of voluntary abortion in many states, the technical possibility and the related legislation on the practice involved in artificial reproduction technologies, The introduction in some countries of euthanasia and of assisted suicide, the development of biotechnologies with their prospective application to the human being, the problem of the increasing cost in healthcare and difficulties of justice. All these are features of the threat to the dignity of the human person and to the protection of life from its beginnings. And we could consider some more deep cultural threats, as reminded Paul Scott-Mans recently. He says, affirmation of radical autonomy and individualization leading to a quasi-absolute belief in the so-called principle of self-disposal, that is not the same of self-determination. Commercialization, which is a commodification of the human body, that leads to tendencies of exploitation. Solidarity, justice, and right allocation of resources are under pressure in many democratic countries. The Catholic Church, as a magisterium, as theologians, as experts in bioethics, in various institutions of Catholic inspiration and civil institutions, has continued to offer its own particular contribution to a bioethical reflection, which would be truly at the service of the human person in every phase of his or her existence, denouncing the risk of using people as objects and or of discrimination against persons. Among the various documents of a bioethical character, I recall the Declaration on Euthanasia of 1980, the Instruction Donum Vitae of 1987 on respect for the human embryo and on the question of techniques of assisted reproduction, and the recent Instruction Dignitas Personae of 2008. John Paul II's encyclical Evangelium Vitae, issued in 1995, deserved particular attention. That encyclical, Cardinal Greccia remarks, represents a key point in the Catholic Church doctrine in the field of bioethics, put forward on the basis of faith and of reason, to all people of good conscience and to all professionals in the areas of scientific research, as of medicine, as also to all parents and legislators. Never before us in our time in history has the claim to the right to life of the unborn child, and now also of the dying person, been so arduously and strongly defended on the part of the magisterium of the Catholic Church, in the face of the weakening of legislation in various states and in the face of the pressure of scientific research. Difficulties between the Church and medical science. Difficulties, misunderstandings, and tension are not lacking in the relationship between the Church and the world of medicine and of bioethics. Not always is simple, is nice, is easy. In the face of problems in bioethics, the Church has positioned itself in recent times and has been interpreted predominantly in this way within a no perspective, no to certain intervention of biomedicine or human reproduction, and no to the claims of self-determination and to designing to end one's own life. Its contribution should be put forward much more within the yes perspective, yes to life, to the centrality of the human person, especially where the latter is more fragile and more vulnerable. Yes to the human body and to the specific characteristic of human sexuality. Yes to the justice and to the solidarity. There is also a yes to confidence in the reason involved in the search for the good to be discerned, also with the help of the science and technology, along with the disciplines of humanism. Yes to cure and care for all human beings. The Church's commitment to taking up again a perspective of dialogue and of hope could be more and more relevant in such a way that, faced with the power of technology and the logic of individualism, or with the prevailing economic influence, the positive responses, yes, with which the Church wishes to identify and to propose, may emerge. Hence, it confirms once more its efforts in favor of the truth, sharing the joys and hopes, the struggles and the achievements, to attain a wisdom which may involve the consciences and the responsibilities of all. It is precisely the contribution to ethical reflection which what is necessary and fundamental, in order not to limit itself to juridical legislative codification in respect of biomedical problems, even though the latter is important and has been well developed in recent years, but which may also impoverish the novelty and the significance of bioethics, sometimes reduced to only a scientific or legal level. There are difficulties for bioethical reflection itself, which has grown up in these years, but which may itself be under threat. An Italian moral theologian, Giannino Piana, recalls, ethics finds itself having to confront a situation which is paradoxical. On the one hand, it is evident that it is necessary to turn to ethics to unravel the key points of great relevance for the correct development of human life. Judgment on manipulative procedures already underway not only at the biological level, but also at the personal and relational level is absolutely urgent. On the other hand, the radical nature of some of the phenomena which have been signaled, the hegemony of technology, the collapse of symbolic language, and the affirmation of a utilitarian and commercial concept of life, seem to render pointless an attempt even to evoke an ethical approach. Where such presuppositions are no longer in evidence, there is no longer space for ethics.